And welcome, everybody.
Oh, hi, everyone.
And a happy Independence Day, happy July 4th to all of our American friends out there.
Wonderful day. It is.
Yeah. So we've got an interesting little show today. I don't know
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody out there has been paying attention or not, but so how have you been, Mr. Hop?
I've been quite well, Crumb, and thank you very much for asking.
So you've shined up your world championship belt in the background there.
Oh yeah, it's right there.
Yeah.
Where's yours?
See, I have mine, but I'm sitting in the dark right now, so
why? No,
there's no point in having my camera on because it's a spooky, scary Saturday today.
Oh, goodness gracious, yes. This is our 13th show, isn't it?
It is the 13th show.
Well, congratulations on our 13th show, Crumb. It's been an absolutely fantastic journey to get to this point.
You could say that, I suppose.
Oh, I just did.
Yeah. It's been an interesting time. Who do we got here? We got Gippy.
I keep
saying happy July 4th, Randy Schreibner.
Woo! That's awesome. Thank you.
Hello, how you doing?
Hey, Randy.
Good to have you all hanging out today. But yes, today, spooky Saturday. We have some interesting stuff to talk about. I mean, like I personally have done like paranormal research and stuff like that. I don't know what Mr. Hop is. I don't know what Mr. Hop's expertise is on the situation, but I've done some pretty interesting stuff that I'd love to talk about today. So,
well, basically, the closest thing I got to the paranormal is having an extremely high OSEP debt, student loan debt, if you will. So that's pretty scary to itself.
Hey, the doctor's with us. Hi, hello. How you doing?
Good afternoon, good doctor.
Welcome to this show. Yeah, so it's going to be I have some interesting stories, but
awesome.
Yeah, I figured, because this show is Mr. Hop's idea. He wanted to talk about something spooky and scary on the 13th show. So
I kind of forgot it also correlates with our wonderful friends down the United States of the Americans, especially on the 4th and all. But however,
which I mean some might call that a horror in itself, but
there's a lot of horror shows going on down there. Yeah. I just hope that all of our friends are hopefully happy and well.
I hope everyone's doing okay.
Yeah, me too. I really, really do.
There's one thing, actually. There is one horror show going on right now. So I guess
what's that?
horror movie. I guess you'd call it maybe horror convention.
Mm.
Funimation's having a virtual convention this weekend.
Oh, good Lord. Every time I hear about we're doing a virtual convention, I do my best impression of Mark Hanaway, who's the Undertaker, for goodness sakes. And it's like, really? Oh, come on.
Yeah, that seems to be like the new thing. It's like we're gonna have an online convention.
Isn't that great? We're gonna have all of our panels and our workshops online, and you two could see our guests, completely caged into their habitat, and you can ask them how you doing for a quick $20.
Yeah. Well, apparently this one was free. I mean, I wouldn't pay for a Funimation production right now anyway, but
yeah.
Tell me that's going. But no, that's more and more I hear about this. It's just like, come on, man, what are we doing?
Well, the thing is, as what we do, just for giggles, we sort of paired basically we sort of came up with that. We really paired it.
I want the residuals, by the way.
Yeah,
everybody out there, that's like you're taking our fucking idea.
10% to start.
Exactly.
And that's just for ticket sales. If you have a DVD version, that's another 15 on top of that.
Yeah. Kippy's saying it. Anime Expo's doing a virtual convention too. Crazy.
Anime Expo. Look at that.
Crazy.
Well, that's the best part. I don't know why fans. I hope fans are not flocking to this, because I really feel it's a giant ripoff of money. The way I look at it, if people want to spend between $70 to $100 on a video game, and you don't get a physical copy, that's one thing. You know what I mean? Because you're there doing your stuff, but paying for a virtual experience at a convention, there better be a lot of caveats behind that for people to jump on board.
Well, I don't know if you heard, just as we're on the topic of video games, I don't know if you heard about the new NBA 2K coming out in 2021. They're charging $10 extra for the next gen versions of it. So
you're more in the video games than I am. So what you feel on that? Because I did catch a little bit of that today.
Well, I think the biggest ridiculous point behind this was that years ago, when cartridges were a thing, right? Everyone was up in arms when things were costing $34, $50. I'm talking Canadian, right? It was outrageous to hear a game be like $50 because X, Y, and Z. And the game companies are like, oh well, the rising cost of making the rising cost of like printing, pressing, the resources that go into making cartridges, and oh my goodness, it's so much packaging, and it's this and that. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And then we moved on to discs, and then retail, and then the
always like the cost of pressing a disc. Oh my god! It's so much.
The technology required to make a laser disc, and those. The copy protection and everything that we have to go into it all. We have to charge $60 for it.
Why do we have to print this physical format for $60 for a laser disc? It just it's so much.
And now we've moved pretty much exclusively to digital content. Yeah. And now they're saying, oh well, it's the next generation, and we have to spend so much on development, and oh my god, we have to
just give us more money. Our great grandchildren need to have gold-plated teeth. Please buy our stuff virtually. Don't ask for physical content for over $100.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, as Gippy's saying, like Game Boy games are $60 in '95, and that's why Tiger Handheld had such a big hold in the market. And yes, I agree, Randy. CD and DVDs are cheap.
They always have been. And the thing is,
the price just keeps going up.
Yeah, it's pure corporate greed at this stage. Again, one of the few things I used to do on the weekly trending fandom shows, we really told our listening audience not to buy the actual virtual copies of things, because that gives a very that gives a message towards the major video game manufacturers saying, yeah, you know what? We like to have air in a bottle. Oh, by the way, you can take away the bottle now, and we'll be more than happy to pay $100 for next to nothing. I always say demand more from the products you're buying. Like, as example, for $100, better come with a free fucking poster, among other things.
Well, the concern now is like game companies have these copyright protection things, and they could go in and switch off the game at any time that they want to, and so all of a sudden, what you've paid for, you can't even play anymore.
Yep.
And aside from that, too, it's like you don't own the game; you just own a license to play it for a short period of time.
Exactly.
So it's very, very curious. So I mean, like charging people out the ass for a product that's not even finished for like half the time.
Yeah, and
because they release 1,000 pieces of DLC for it and charge you at the nose for it.
Yeah, and on top of that, the biggest complaint I heard about video games being released today, it's like, well, we're underneath a time crunch and we have to release this on our due date. So here's your game. It's full of bugs, and we're going to keep updating things as we go along here. And by the way,
Amanda Gray on Facebook says DLCs are the problems nowadays. Absolutely agree.
Yeah. Hello, Amanda. How are you?
Thanks so much for tuning in.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's honestly it's an absolute headache, and I don't know if you heard about the UK ruling.
No,
I think they're ruling shortly on it.
Okay.
Or they're taking a very big look at it right now. With what the heck is it called? Loot boxes, loot crates.
Oh, going back to that. So, okay, cool.
Basically, in game there are options to like get a random piece of loot or in-game item if you spend in-game currency normally, which takes forever to accumulate, or you can spend $5 and you can get a box immediately. And like it's really prevalent in sports games because you're basically buying like card packs and you open them up and you get those players or you get little boosts or whatever else. Mm-hmm. So the UK has been talking about it for a while, but apparently they're going to be ruling on it soon, on whether or not it's considered gambling.
Yeah.
And if it's considered gambling, it will be banned from video games.
That's
in the UK. So we're going to see if that goes through. Like companies like EA are screwed.
Oh yeah,
like 2K screwed. So like they're going to be passing that cost off to the consumer 100%. So all of a sudden, you're going to see games that were $70 and now $80. You're going to see them skyrocket to 120.
Oh, Jesus. I like gaming just as much. I like gaming just as much as the other people. But once things start hitting a certain threshold, people start asking themselves why are they really buying this stuff. Because there's a whole bunch of psychology behind video games these days as well. Colors, sound, everything else like that. It's like, ooh.
Yeah. And Randy brings up a good point here. He's like, favorite thing was when Rich Forum Review Tech USA opened up a physical copy of Super Mario Odyssey. There is no cartridge, just a download code of the game, which is what happens 99% of the time now.
Oh, I'd be pissed.
Most of the time now, when you're buying a physical disc game, like Switch, you still have the cartridges, which is fine.
Yeah.
But most of the games now, you either buy it if you're lucky enough to get a disc, and not just a case that has a download code in it.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to get a disc, you pop the disc in, and then you can't even play the game because the game says it has to download the other 99% of the game.
Wow, crazy.
It is. It's an absolute nightmare right now in the gaming world.
So here's an interesting question for you. You know this a little bit more than I do. Actually, probably a lot more than I do. Do you feel that the actual data that's on the discs storage is just way too small, or what?
No?
No? Okay.
No.
So it's all just a giant ploy then.
Yeah, it's 100% just an absolute joke. You can fit an entire game. Like you can fit Super Smash Brothers Brawl. You can fit Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which are massive games, by the way. Yeah. You can fit them on a tiny disc that's the size of an SD card.
Oh, Jesus.
Don't tell me that you can't fit something on like a Blu-ray or anything else like that. That's absolutely
I almost forgot about that Blu-ray technology and storage.
Amanda Gray says, I don't mind paying over $50 for a good finished game. Me too, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I would pay like $70 or $80 if it was a game that could last me. Like if Banjo-Kazooie, like the original Banjo-Kazooie came out today, I would not hesitate to pay $60 for that game. Not hesitate, because that was a fantastic game. Its replayability, like it's got content. I could play it for hours and hours and hours. Like Final Fantasy X, which is one of my favorite games. I bought that game like so many times over, just because like I want that to be supported.
Yeah.
Like that game, I have no problem at all paying $70 for, because there's so much content. Perfect example is Last of Us Part 2. There's a data disc and then a game disc, and that's it. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. That happens a lot now. I mean, look back at the old days of PlayStation 1, where you had like 4 or 5 discs for a game. Right?
Oh, I remember that. I had a couple of PS1 games, and
like
I came with a couple of discs.
The best games, like when you saw that a game had like 5 discs, you're like, I'm getting some value out of this.
I'm going to be here for a long time.
Yeah. It's like you didn't think at the time of like, oh my God, all these glitches that are going to be like,
and back
like
back
you saw
in the day,
you saw quality.
Yeah, and back in the day, the PS1s and the Xboxes and stuff like that, they didn't have the online aspect to them. That's
No.
so like here's your self-contained unit. Plug it in your TV, put your controllers in there, insert your memory cards, and that's it. You're off to the races. Done.
Well, that was back in the day when we had like LAN parties and stuff like that to play multiplayer.
And the thing is, it was a lot of pain in the ass to put together, but when it came together, people were going, "This is the best thing ever," and they had tons and tons of fun, and it was great. I think that a lot of video game producers are just getting greedy and lazy when it comes down to their products.
Well, 100%. That's what it comes down to.
And then it's very
just they squeeze more and more and more money out of people.
Squeeze it.
Like, talking about nightmares, I mean, let's take a look at what happened with Bethesda.
Yeah.
And the whole Fallout 76 debacle.
Oh, goodness gracious, yes.
Talk about a bait and switch.
Mm-hmm.
Like, holy crap. How can you tell your customers in good conscience?
Yeah.
How can you look your customers in the eyes and tell them that you ran out of canvas? Like,
right?
What? It's like the entire world's stock of canvas was just gone.
Yeah.
Good grief.
Remember, canvas is a resource. It's not a manufactured material.
It's an endangered species.
Exactly. Basically, to basically raise a piece of canvas takes years and years of cultivation, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of massaging it with secret cow milk and everything else like that. And it's really a pain. In doing this through flocks and flocks of canvas creatures, just
you have to raise the canvas bulls from calves. Takes years.
Exactly.
Absolutely nonsense, man.
Oh, totally.
You know what I miss? I miss the days of like having my friends over and like only having one good controller, having the knockoffs controllers, right?
Yeah.
Those were the days.
Yeah.
I mean, and like you couldn't let them use your controller, right? Like you could, because it does like. I mean, we're talking about superstitions today, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking a bit about that. It's like that's you always have that one controller that like no matter what, it's like no that one's yours. Like you just can't use it. No one else is allowed to touch it. Weird
case,
right? And you see it to this day, right? I mean, all nonsense and drama in the fighting game community aside, we're actually going to talk about that next week. I think I want to get Drexel's opinion on that.
Okay.
So yeah, just heads up for everybody. We are having Drexel back on next week for a full show.
That'd be awesome. Drexel disappeared on us, that bastard.
Well, he had work to do, unfortunately.
Oh, he had work. And how often do we invite someone onto our prestigious show of happiness? He should quit his job and just be with us the duration of that.
I know.
Broadcast.
He was pretty heartbroken that he missed it.
Very inconsiderate of him putting his, his work first and his livelihood first versus our broadcast. Like unconsideracy of some people.
What's a bad example of a newer game? Zoo Tycoon is a great game versus Planet Zoo, where they're charging you $10 for 5 animals. That's insane.
What? Why do people keep paying this shit?
That's why they do it though. Like I'm guessing Zoo Tycoon, you get like all of the animals, but you have to unlock them as you go along. But you have this new like mobile mentality of like these mobile games are like, well, you could spend like 40 hours or like 30 days unlocking this thing, or you could just pay $3 to unlock it right now. What do you think people are going to do most of the time? Like, they don't care.
I got the ADD kicking in. So it's like,
so I mean, it's like you make it so unattainable in game, and you make it much more viable to do it through other means, and then all of a sudden you have people paying to speed things up. Like it happens all the time.
Yeah, it's really interesting how the industry is versus what it should have been. Like, again, when I talk about cartridges back in the day when you had the Atari 2600, you went out and you bought a cartridge, you put it in there. Not the best graphics on the planet, but you know what? It didn't have to be because it was just fun to play. And
well, speaking of cartridges, back in the day, everyone had the Ritual, right? You had everyone had that one game that didn't work, unless you like turned it 360 degrees and blew in it, and then rubbed it 3 times, faced north, and then plugged it in. What, Mr. Hop? What were some of your rituals for games?
Well, Crumb, I have to be honest with you. When I was in the video game stuff, none of that shit happened. You basically plugged and you played, and that was it. I basically only came across stuff like that when the Nintendo first came out.
Yeah, Nintendo was really bad for that.
Yeah, and then after that, the Super Nintendo came out, and so forth and so forth. Because back in my day, when a product wasn't working, back in my day, Biller, when products weren't working properly because you spent your hard-earned money on them, you brought them back to the fucking store, you plunked it on the counter, you brought your receipt and say, this no work, make better. Here's your new one, sir. Thank you very much. Good day. Bye-byes. That's it. None of this bullshit that a lot of gamers today are going through. Oh, look, I bought your product. Okay, it's not working. Oh, you have to download things. Hold on. I am the consumer. Pardon fucking me. I have to do more work to buy your fucking product. Am I part of your fan club? Your league, perhaps? Am I part of some sort of secret society where you just take my money and I just do everything that you tell me? No.
Oh, welcome to modern day.
Well, the thing is that I could get going on this for hours, but super long story short, I think that a lot of gamers today have forgotten they simply are the fucking consumer. Don't pay for secondhand bullshit. Your time and your money is not important. It's super duper important. And if people keep forgetting about that, these larger game companies are going to walk all over people.
Well, nowadays, it doesn't seem to matter for people, though.
Well, the thing is that I'm pretty sure that if people start getting together around the planet and saying, look, we're not going to buy your fucking product, it's going to end up in the garbage, things will change. Things will change.
I'll correct you in just a moment here. Shadows King says cartridges were lung capacity trainers disguised as games. Absolutely. Randy's saying blowing it. Yeah, that's how it worked. To get to the point here regarding this, you're forgetting that the vast majority of gamers, which make up probably about 30% of purchasing, they don't matter to these companies.
Of course.
Like,
they should.
When companies like Bethesda or EA or like Blizzard are making games, they are not making them with the individual that is actually going to play it for X, like a 3-digit amount of hours, right? They don't care.
Yep.
They're basing it on the high end, what people call quote unquote whales, right? They account for the people that are so like entrenched and addicted to their games that they will pay literally any amount of money to get the top end product.
Yeah.
And they will spend $400 or $500 on a game, and they will dark side Phil spend $250,000 on a mobile game.
Yeah.
Just because they want to be the best. So those individuals ruin it for the actual consumers.
Yeah.
They don't really care.
No, and the thing is that, you know what, as much as it breaks my over fat rated heart, yeah, you're correct.
And Randy's saying top loader NES and SNES helped. I agree. Yeah, I didn't have nearly as many problems with Super Nintendo.
Yeah. But however, what's this?
Kids' newest hottest games. Kids don't care about microtransactions. That's a big thing too. Microtransactions in games. That's a terrifying thing.
Yeah, and it's also kind of funny that today a lot of kids these days, you know, again, let's use the terminology child for a second here. We're looking at an individual who's living at home that has an allowance, so forth and so forth. Are these kids spending their hard-earned money putting this together? And I guess if they're satisfied with the product that they're purchasing, I guess it's one thing. But I know that a lot of gamers today, you know, really take their parents' money. And how many stories have you heard about kids getting their parents' credit card and just racking the fuck out of it?
Yeah, because people don't pay attention.
Yeah, exactly.
And Jay Lydian saying here, you should not blow on the NES cartridge despite home theory. That's true. You actually damage the NES cartridges by doing that. But it's always like one of those rituals, right? It works once for you, and that's what you do all the time. Like that's just what it's a superstition, right? Like it's not anything based in facts or reality. It's just a superstition.
It's not scientific, but
it's not scientific.
It works, and we're happy with it, and we'll keep going down this path until it does no longer work.
Like, it works every single time, and you don't know why, but there you go.
Yeah, no, for sure.
No, I agree. Microtransactions suck.
Oh, yeah. I just hope that the major consumer base bounces back from stuff like this.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit about that. So, getting on superstitions, Mr. Hop, you wanted to talk about this topic.
Well, I did. Well, the thing is, it was just a general topic overall. Talking, you know, it's our 13th show. You know,
well, did you have any superstitions? Is what I was going to ask.
That's the funny part. Not really. Reason being is that, you know, I'm not really a superstitious person, if you know what I mean. But however, I know you have a large plethora of the supernatural and superstitious and stuff like that. And yeah.
Yeah. Again, and if anybody in the chat, feel free to throw out some of your superstitions or some of your beliefs as well. We're discussing them for a little bit today. So yeah, no, like I've delved in a lot of the supernatural and paranormal stuff and everything else like that. I know we started off the show today talking about the horrors of the video game industry.
And that's super scary to itself.
That is super scary. It's a super scary Saturday today. So, but yeah, we're going to just segue in a little bit into this topic today. So, yeah, I spent probably a good chunk of time. I don't even know how many years, but I spent a good chunk of time as a paranormal investigator. Headed up my own team for a little while, and I'd still love to get into it today. It's just the problem with paranormal investigations.
Okay,
is that you need more than one person, like at least two people. It's the basic requirement, right? Because you can go out and experience something, and unless you have somebody with you to corroborate it, no one's going to believe you.
Yeah,
like at all. No one's going to believe you. And I mean, with valid reason, right? Because I mean, there's plenty of times where people go out there and make stuff up and whatever else, and blah blah blah, and all of a sudden you end up things with like aliens and
so like the old man from Sonic.
Yeah.
The blue demon is here.
Blue demon.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So like I've delved into a bunch of stuff. Like I full disclosure though, don't, unless you are very trained in it, do not get into Ouija boards or stuff like that, because I'll get into that in a little bit.
Okay.
But there's a big reason as to why you don't want to get into Ouija boards. Shadows King says, I like tarot. Cool art on the cards usually. I love tarot. Like tarot is very, very interesting. I personally, like, I have a deck myself. I do tarot readings. Usually they're pretty accurate. Depends on the attitude of the cards that day. But Lydian, tarot is based on symbolic tropes, for lack of a better term. Tarot is interesting because it's a combination of things, right? It's down to, it basically gives you information that you already know. It just makes you more aware of it. So it's somewhat based on astrology, as Shadows King is talking about here. Sage for a new house, Randy, and gets rid of the evil. Absolutely, that goes back to native stuff, like indigenous peoples.
Yep.
They believe that smudging cleared out energies and moved out energies. So something very interesting that I actually learned my time. Yeah, the attitude of the person getting the reading. It actually is 100. Sorry, I'm just, before I move on to this next topic. It is actually supposed to be 100% of the person getting the reading. The person doing the reading should not be injecting their emotions into it whatsoever. It is actually what people seem to kind of lose the plot on here, is that it's not the person. So like the person reading the cards, they're not doing anything like psychic or mediumship or whatever thing else like that. What you're doing is you're interpreting the message that the cards are bringing out, and the idea is that the cards are being manipulated, or whatever else. The cards are listening, quote unquote, to the people that the reading is for. So that's how the cards come up, and the reader is not really doing anything other than just conveying what is happening on the cards, because the cards are trying to deliver a message to the person it's being intended for. Which is why if you are a tarot card reader, best not to read tarot cards on a day where you're not clear-headed, because your intention and your energy will actually interfere with that. So it's a lot of different stuff to go into, really, really high level stuff. But just for things to remember, when you're going to a tarot card reader, they're not doing anything like mysticism or psychic or anything else like that. The connection is actually between the tarot deck, the tarot cards, and the person that it's being read for. So that's a very interesting thing.
Dig it. Wow.
But yeah, so one and that kind of segues into this next topic that I wanted to cover. One thing that I learned, that as I was getting into paranormal investigations and things like that, that energy and like electricity and frequencies. So like there's a bunch of different things. So like electricity and electromagnetic frequencies very, very much influence psychic energy and paranormal happenings, right? So I don't know if you're versed on this topic at all, Mr. Hop. Are you?
Like a very, very little bit. A little transparency. Like, you know, sometimes there's stuff that's around, and sometimes you just get a feeling about certain things, and sometimes your imagination really starts kicking in overdrive and stuff like that. Like, just sometimes you walk into an old room, you just kind of feel that something's off, and you're not quite sure exactly what it is, but however, you just sort of get a little bit creepy, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So
So what if I told you? What if I told you?
Oh goodness, chills.
What if I told you that those feelings can be manipulated by an invisible force?
I would say I need more information on this. How is this manipulated by an invisible force?
Yeah. So Amanda Gray says, I believe in negative energy collecting in certain places like the Gettysburg battlefield. Very important. That's a very good point, and a very important point that will come up later in this explanation. Very, very astute, though. Because energy, just think about it. Your thoughts are energy, right? The synapses in our brain are electrical pulses and bioelectrical and blah, 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 right? So when we're talking about energy, emotions and memories and even sight and sound and stuff like that, that's all energy in some degree. Emotion's a particularly strong energy. And this is why I find Five Nights at Freddy's such a fascinating thing, because
it is, yeah.
Well, this is the reason why. It started out as something that was like really campy, and then as the lore is starting to get deeper, Scott Cawthorn is actually getting into a really interesting paranormal side of things, like a scientific paranormal side of things, because the game lore and the book lore now is starting to get into the use of pain, like emotional energy, as an energy source. And that's very interesting. Shadows King says, I don't believe in the supernatural, but always trust your gut when something is creepy. Well, this is one thing that people like. Supernatural, I know it sounds fantastic and fanatical, but supernatural just means things that we don't have. Paranormal is stuff that we don't have an explanation for currently.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that there is not an explanation for it. It just means that there is not an explanation for it at this given time, which is why it's interesting to research and look into. But the whole reason that I'm talking about this stuff. So what if I told you that you could be manipulated by invisible forces?
Well, if they're invisible forces and I can be manipulated by them, are they still invisible? I'm totally kidding, by the way. Sorry.
So
I do not know.
You can't see sound, right? You can't see sound. You can't see
This is true.
You can't see scent. You can't see generally you can't see electricity or electromagnetic waves, right?
Okay.
So this is one thing that I've learned.
Okay.
And this goes back to a bunch of different things, like Gettysburg, like Niagara Falls, etc. Some very, very haunted locations. One thing that a lot of these haunted locations have in common, especially those in Europe, it depends on the area, but a lot of them are built, and the most haunted locations are built with limestone.
Okay.
This is something that's verifiable, right? You look it up.
Okay.
One of the most common building materials that have been reported as having hauntings are limestone structures, and I think the next one is wood.
Really?
So limestone and wood
Okay.
are generally the most haunted locations that get reported. The reason being,
I was just going to ask you that.
the reason being is what it seems and what I've deduced. And like again, I'm not going to point anything scientific here because I don't have a PhD behind my name. But what I've deduced and what other people have surmised is that the structure of these items, so the structure of limestone as opposed to concrete or as opposed to granite or whatever else, which is also similar to wood in terms of molecular structure, is that it is absorbent.
Okay.
Limestone is very absorbent. So I think it's one of the most absorbent stones, actually. In terms of like its structure is like a lattice, so it has like holes in it.
Yeah.
All the way through, and it's been. I don't know if it's been proven or it's been studied on, but it holds energy, right? So like you can not necessarily charge it like a battery, but if energy gets into it, like I'm saying energy in the terms of like a very loose word, like a loose term of the word energy. But say something like gets stored in the limestone, it stays in the limestone for a very, 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 very long time.
Interesting.
Or
okay.
if it gets absorbed into wood, wood deteriorates a lot quicker than limestone.
Yeah.
And it leaks out of the wood a lot faster. So you don't see as many hauntings and things like that, or quality hauntings, I would say, from wooden structures as you do from limestone structures, simply because if it's over the course of a century, it's going to have leaked out that energy a lot faster than it would if it was limestone.
Gotcha.
Shadows King is asking, where do you get a PhD in the supernatural? Exactly. I believe it would actually be a parapsychology course that you'd have to take. Not necessarily a supernatural PhD, but you can get a degree in parapsychology, which is just the study of weird science, basically, which doesn't really amount to much else than just having a doctorate in parapsychology.
Mm.
But all this other stuff is brand new science. It's really, really weird stuff. It's stuff that I love to talk about. It's stuff that I'd love to dive in and research on. I just don't have the means to do so. But getting back to the energy discussion. So
yes,
when you look at hauntings, right? When you look at hauntings, there are two distinct types of hauntings. Do you know what those are, Mr. Hop?
I unfortunately do not.
Okay. So when we technically three, but the third one's not really a real haunting.
Wait a second. I almost want to. Can I guess?
You can guess.
Awesome. Thank you. Physical, such as stuff moving around, things like that. Is that one? I'm not quite sure what the terminology.
I'll answer. I'll let you know after you finish.
The second one I would assume would be seeing ghosts and getting feelings. And stuff like that. Again, super layman person here.
Yeah.
So just spitballing it, if you know what I mean. So,
any guess on the third?
I'm gonna say possession, perhaps.
You're pretty close.
Physical possession of an unknown spiritual entity. Using my Ghostbuster terminology. So
Shadows King says, sorry, I know you're into it, but that just sounds like another way for colleges to scam people. Actually, it is a real it is. No, I'm dead serious.
Sorry.
The study of parapsychology is not the study of ghosts. The study of parapsychology is like the study of the weird things that the mind does. It's actually a valid school of research. It's not like ghost hunting and stuff like that. It's actually something completely different. But yeah. You can get a doctorate in parapsychology.
And the reason why I was giggling like that, what a major college university scamming students out of money. never, ever.
So yeah, you're actually fairly close. There's a few things that cross over.
Right.
But basically, when we're talking about hauntings, there's two actual hauntings, and there's one that is more of a Hollywood, but what people generally understand as a haunting, but it isn't actually haunting. Okay. So the one where you're saying that physical things moving around, etc., that is generally described as a poltergeist.
Yeah.
Now, poltergeists are not real hauntings.
Okay. Shocker,
I know. So like the movie Poltergeist, it's not actually, like ghosts that come out of a television or ghosts that come out of a sock drawer. A poltergeist activity.
Cute. Or trees that eat friggin' kids.
Yeah, trees that eat people. That's just Hollywood. Poltergeist activity is actually it's normally reported around funny enough, teenage girls that are going through puberty. That's like 99% of the poltergeist phenomena that has been that I'm aware of that has been reported.
Really?
Now, that's because when you're talking about these things, these people are going through immense mental shifts, like immense mental stress, things like that. So don't ruin the poltergeist legacy for me, Dead Punk Gage. I'm sorry, I have to. Generally, so poltergeist activity is what you would call a pseudoscience, because you're talking about psychic manipulation.
Okay.
Right. So things moving around, things like doors slamming or things falling off the shelf or things like the power turning off, et cetera, et cetera. That is closer. That's not a haunting. That's caused by immense emotional stress.
Okay.
And immense mental stress. And when you're talking about it, it generally manifests in teenage girls because, well, that's the way it goes sometimes. But people who don't have control over that, who are in that like sweet spot of psychic ability, I want to say, like it's a honky thing to say, but it's there, right?
Okay.
So having people having records of people being able to control different things, it sounds more like the movie Carrie or The Grudge. It's very much closer to Carrie, having your immense mental stress manifest. Yeah, it's that's basically what it comes down to. So it's a manifestation of mental energy that comes out in radical ways. That is a poltergeist technically, and it's not an actual haunting.
Okay.
That's what people mistake. So if people want to go and research what poltergeist activity, that's more or less what it comes down to. You're talking about slamming doors and stuff like that with mental energy, blah, blah, blah. There are two types of actual hauntings. What I classify as actual hauntings, what most people classify as actual hauntings.
Mm-hmm.
There is the first one, which is much more typical, which a lot of people, this is stuff that you're going to see on mainstream TV, basically, is what's called a residual haunting. Okay. So this is something that is not intelligent. It does not interact with you. You cannot interact with it. Anything that you do has no effect on it, blah, blah, blah. It's like a playback of a tape.
Okay.
It's like it's on repeat. It will play the same exact thing. These are the hauntings that you hear people describe of people walking through a wall, or people or they see someone walking down a hallway and they walk through them, or they see them opening a door, or they make tea and then they disappear. That's a residual haunting. You were going to say something?
Oh, I was going to say if they're making tea, that's really nice of them.
Yeah. Well, you don't actually get to have any because it's just...
Oh, that sucks then. Why are they even there? My goodness gracious. Anyways, I'm being silly yet again. I apologize. Please continue.
So when you look at these ones, that one, because that goes into what I was talking about before with limestone and the wood, right? It's those are the most common ones found in those locations because if you have somebody, for example, and this has actually happened at Unity Church here in town.
Oh, okay. I know Unity Church. Yep.
Yeah. So when you have somebody that is, and this goes back to what Amanda was saying with Gettysburg Battlefield, when you have someone that has spent so much time and they have spent so much emotion and they've spent like just a great time.
Yeah.
It's very, Gettysburg is very much a residual haunting because the amount of emotional pain and death. Residual hauntings are not just caused by pain and death, though. They're caused by they're either extreme emotional points, or they're just over a very long period of time putting a lot of time and emotion into something. So you can think of like an old building, right? That's somebody's like great grandfather. They put their somebody's great grandfather or grandmother or whatever else. They built a house. And they put all their time and effort into it. They raised several generations of families there. They had a lot of great times. They might have died in the house. They might not have died in the house. But basically, they have imprinted their very being onto the fabric of that house.
Yeah.
Right?
Build it from the ground up type of thing.
They build it from the ground up, and they put their energy and for lack of a better word, they put their love into it. They imprint themselves on the objects. So when you're seeing the quote unquote ghost, it's not that person. They're not trapped there. They're not stuck there. It's the residual emotion that's on playback.
Okay.
Right. Same thing with the Gettysburg Battlefield. There was a lot of emotion. There was a lot of pain. There was a lot of expelling of emotions that were on that battlefield, which is why a lot of people report seeing or hearing or smelling or whatever else, like smelling the smoke and everything else like that, because that's what people felt at that point. Like the same thing at Drummond Hill Cemetery.
Yeah.
Where the Battle of 1812 was, or the War of 1812.
Yeah.
There's the Battle of Drummond Hill, and a lot of people died there. It was a very intense battle. Very much the same thing there. People experience, like, they can feel the emotions, they can smell the gunpowder, they can feel like people are behind them and stuff like that, or whatever else. That is a residual because it's something that's there. It's something that's powerful. It's very, very interesting. When you're talking about the ability to see or smell or hear or replay, that differs from person to person.
Okay.
Because our brains are like radio stations, right? They're like their own little radios.
Okay.
So I might be on a frequency. I might be on frequency 105, right? And Mr. Hop, you might be on frequency 95.
Okay. I'll accept that.
Right?
Yep.
So in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter what our brains are at frequencies, just because we can see stuff, we can hear stuff, we generally experience the same stuff. When we're talking about residual hauntings, the residual haunting, or that emotion or whatever else, right?
Mm-hmm.
That emotion might be on frequency 103.
Ah.
You won't see it or hear it or experience it, but I might be able to pick up.
Yeah, because you're close to that frequency point.
Because I'm closer to that frequency. Think of like when you're tuning a radio station, right? You're almost at the radio station, but you're not quite, but you can start to hear it, right?
Yep.
That's kind of like what this thought is that
Gotcha.
the thought process is that.
So is it a thought or a feeling?
It's both.
Okay.
It depends, actually.
All right.
So you get different types of psychics and mediums, and this is why this big discussion happens about, this person's a fake, blah, 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 blah. Okay. There's many, many different types. There's because most often you hear clairvoyant. There are plenty of different types. There's clairvoyance, there's clairsentience, there's clear something or other. I don't remember all of them. Basically, it comes down to the senses. So clairvoyant is that you can see, if I'm recalling that correctly. Okay. Clairvoyance means that you are able to see. Clairsentience means that you get the feeling, you know it. You don't know how you know it, but you just know it. There's one that you can feel things. There's one that you can smell things. There's one that you can hear things. Clairaudience.
Okay. Gotcha.
So there's different types of psychic abilities that everybody possesses. Not everybody possesses them strongly, but people possess different things different ways. That's why when you walk into a room or you feel something, that is a type of psychic ability. For example, there's people in Unity Church that would say they would smell cigar smoke when there was nobody smoking, but the previous pastor that passed away 50 years ago used to smoke cigars all the time.
Interesting.
And he loved being there, and his energy is still there, and they say they still feel him all the time. And some people say they see him. Some people say that they feel him there. Other people say that they smell cigar smoke. So that's, again, it's them being on different frequencies, them being on different areas, but they're all honing in on the same thing. I'm sorry, Dead Punk Gage had a question here. So would you classify haunted asylums or sanitariums as hauntings or poltergeists? Those would generally be, I would say 9 times out of 10, those would be residual hauntings based on the building. There are other types, which I'll get into in just a second, however, but they would not be poltergeist. They might have been poltergeist activity when they had people active at them, but when you're talking about old and abandoned, those are definitely 9 times out of 10, those would be residual. The other type of haunting, and this one gets really juicy.
Okay.
The other type of haunting would be an intelligent haunting.
Intelligent haunting. I never heard of this.
Yes. So this type of haunting, it actually interacts with you.
Oh,
It actually responds to things that you say or do. It has a presence, it has an awareness, and it could adversely affect you.
lovely.
So if you're talking about possessions, this would technically be a form of that. So does not necessarily mean this was a person or a thing. Actually, most oftentimes it was not a person or a thing.
Okay, and then what is it then?
It's raw emotion most of the time.
Okay.
It's weird to say, and it's weird to feel, but it was I think, like, and when I say Indian in this next part, I mean like from India. I'm not talking about natives,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure natives covered this too. So Indians had this belief that if enough people believed in something, it would become a thing. It would become real, right? We saw it here on the western side with Freddy Krueger,
Okay.
right? And when enough people, when it's Freddy Krueger, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies,
Yeah, with the missiles.
yeah, in the mythos. So enough people feared Freddy, he would invade their dreams and would actually have physical repercussions, and then people just forget about him, loses all of his power, disappears until someone remembers him again.
Yep.
So in India, these things were called tulpa.
Tulpa. All right.
Like The Conjuring, exactly, Dead Pun. So they were called tulpas, Tulpa, if people out there want to go and research this. So tulpas are things that basically are created from thought. So this opens up a bunch of different really interesting things. A lot of stuff on the religious side, which I'm not going to get into, but it is very, very, very interesting. So things like the chupacabra, things like Bigfoot, things like the Loch Ness monster, etc., etc., etc. Things like ghosts and hauntings. These things could technically exist because enough people believe that they exist. So
Okay.
the collective energy of all these people's thoughts, if it's enough, could manifest as an actual thing. That's what this belief is. So I always like to point to, because I've actually had physical experience with a tulpa, and these things are not to be taken lightly. I know people will like to joke about it. There is a tunnel, like an old train tunnel near Niagara Falls.
Okay.
It's nicknamed the Blue Ghost Tunnel. It's was only ever in use for like a couple of years. It didn't really have anything going for it. They basically made this train tunnel to go under the Welland Canal, because they needed to have trains going through it. And they didn't want to build a bridge, so they just dug under the canal and they built a train tunnel.
Which is kind of funny. We don't want to build a bridge, but we'll dig underneath it.
Yeah. Well, they thought it was a better idea.
Of course.
So,
And the question is, how much did that cost? That's a scary question.
Yeah, it probably cost a lot. But bottom line, they built it as a one track under the tunnel. But around the time of when they finished the tunnel, most of the lines have been purchased by the modern day trains, like in the company that is now modern day CN, I believe.
Yeah, I was gonna say CN. Yep.
It wasn't back then; it was something else. But basically, what happened was most of the train tracks were dual track, and this one was single, so it didn't get used often because it didn't make sense.
Yeah,
and they had literally just made a swing bridge that was a dual track swing bridge nearby, so they just used that instead.
Gotcha.
So this train tunnel was in use for like maybe a year or two.
Wow.
It only ever had one accident from what I've ever been able to find. There was only one accident where two trains collided and killed their operators. But this was like 100, 200 yards away from the train tunnel. Didn't happen in the tunnel.
Okay.
So there is no recorded deaths in the tunnel itself. There is no recorded instances of anything happening in the tunnel. But this tunnel is apparently the most haunted location in Ontario.
Okay.
So get this. All right.
Okay.
If you're following me.
I am.
Just guess. Take a wild guess. Take a wild swing at this. What do you think the material that they built the tunnel was?
Limestone.
Got it in one.
Yeah,
So,
there it is.
the Niagara Escarpment is made primarily of limestone.
There's a lot of limestone there.
A lot of limestone there. And Niagara Falls and the Niagara region is notorious for being one of the most haunted areas in North America.
How odd.
How weird.
How weird.
How strange. So what is interesting, and I see Nani's got a story. We'll get to that in just a moment. But so they made this tunnel out of limestone. Okay. And there was this story that had been circulating for I don't even know how long. Longer than I've been alive. About how this woman committed suicide by jumping off the top of the tunnel into a train. Never has been like there's no actual reality of this happening, period. Just story. And the story goes that you could see her blue ghost in the tunnel.
Interesting.
Searching for her like lover or whatever else. Blah, blah, blah. That's the story, right?
Okay.
So plenty of people go to this tunnel. I don't recommend going there now. It's not safe. And I'm saying it's not safe because they don't maintain it at all. And the tunnel has been. I went there probably about 10 years ago at this point. 10 years ago, the tunnel was leaking. Ooh. So I can't imagine how bad shape it is now. But I would not recommend anybody going there. Aside from the fact that it's trespassing, so number one, don't go. Number two, don't go because it's not physically safe. Because every year the water freezes over in the tunnel, makes the cracks a little bit bigger, etc., etc. It's not stable. It's not safe to go in.
And also, we talked about limestone and how not great of a building material that is, especially if it's always chipping. It's got holes and it's perforated. It's like, all right,
yeah, exactly. So it's not a good idea to go there. Very soft stone. It's eroding very quickly, and I'm pretty sure soon that's going to be all underwater. So just don't go.
Yeah,
just listen to the stories. Don't go. Basically, went there a number of years ago. And did a number of investigations on the tunnel. Mm-hmm. Couldn't find anything in historical records about anything happening there. But something is there. Okay. I will say definitively that something is there. So going there, it's a weird sense. It's a really weird thing. And people say this about Niagara Falls and the Niagara Falls waterfall too. Yeah. Is that you get this urge to go back. You have this feeling that just like it pulls you back to it. It's a really weird sensation. It's a really weird thing. So like when you go to this tunnel and you leave, you always have this like calling to go back there for some reason. So I had gone there a number of times. We've done a number of recordings. We have found that there's about 5 different persistent personalities regardless of who goes there. So we had a bunch of different people, and we didn't always have the same team that went there. So we had different voices, different personalities and stuff that went there every single time. But every single time we got the same 5 personalities on recording. And we didn't hear them at the time. We didn't hear them at the time that we were there, like through our ears. We heard them on playback of audio. So there was just to run down the list. Okay. There's a really old British man. There was a younger, gruff sounding man. Okay. There was a very airy, light young woman. She sounded very young. But she said, but like I'd say probably like mid-20s. She sounded young, but she sounded like really aloof and just like not really knowing what was going on. But there was that voice. There was a very young girl. I would say no more than 5 or 6. Very, very young girl. And then there was a really deep, gritty, very visceral, guttural man. Okay. Like what you would stereotypically call like demonic, but it was something along those lines. It looked very like dark, very hoarse, very rough sounding man. Those 5 voices were persistent. You'd love to hear that audio, Amanda? Yeah, we have some of it. I've been looking through my records. I've been trying to find the recordings of them on my PC. Hey, Philip, Drex is going to be back next week. Next week. I've been looking through my audio to try and find the recordings. I have to look through a few different places, but I have some DVDs of our best recordings from these people. So I'll have to dig that up. But I'll have them somewhere, and I'll probably post them eventually. But basically, these 5 personalities, and I say personalities because they kept not only their voices and the way they sounded, but they kept the way they reacted, and they kept their demeanor.
Okay.
Throughout 5 years of trips.
Interesting.
And not only that, they also remembered names.
Oh, that's creepy.
Which was weird.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking about an intelligent haunting, that's what I'm talking about right there.
Okay.
But the point of this is, I don't believe that any of these people, quote unquote, died in the tunnel. I believe that these were manifestations of emotions.
Interesting.
Because people go to the Blue Ghost Tunnel and they expect to be spooked.
Okay.
Right? They expect to be afraid or whatever else. So going there, I like to use this analogy. You're going there with a bucket full of paint, right?
Yep.
And the paint is your emotion, whether it's fear, whether it's whatever else. That paint is your emotion. And you walk into that tunnel, and if the second that you get spooked or hear something, you throw that paint against the wall.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have to imagine there's so many people that went there before you that did the exact same thing. There's layers and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of paint. And paint being emotion. So at some point, these tulpas had got to a point where they were so concentrated, they were so fed with that emotion that they just manifested.
Interesting.
Which it is very interesting because
it is.
So the whole point behind this, is that when we were in the tunnel, number of years back, we brought sorry, this is my train of thought. We brought one of our friends to the tunnel, and she was super spooked. She is very susceptible to influencing and all this other stuff.
Okay.
Not a great person in hindsight to bring to
hey, are you really sensitive towards the paranoia?
To an energetically
come on, we're going to go to this place. It'll be fine.
Yeah, not the best person to bring to an energetically charged place, but anyway, we brought her there. A number of the recordings, like the best recordings that we had, were actually.
That's timing.
Yeah.
Well, gotta get going.
So anyway, so we were going basically best recordings were involving her.
Okay.
So we brought her into the tunnel, and she was pretty damn well spooked the entire time she was in there. And then we have on a bunch of different recordings that she's basically saying, like, did anybody feel that? Like, oh my God, like I just felt something cold brush past me. Like, did anybody feel that?
Yeah.
And on recording at that point, we got the old man's voice saying like asking her who she was or something like that.
That's fucking creepy.
Yeah.
What are you doing here?
And it was like this old British man. He was just, I can't remember exactly what he said. But it was something to the effect of like, who goes there?
All right.
He was like, just like, who goes there? And then she's like, did anybody feel that? I just got like a really cold breeze. And so that was the start of things. Well, earlier in that day, we had gone through, and we were trying to do some readings in the middle of the tunnel. We got an EMF spike, which was weird. So we heard people coming down the hill, so we escorted them in. We were showing them, talking about different things, blah 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 blah. And then they were dead silent. They were kids. They were young kids.
Gotcha.
They were dead. They were so scared shitless about everything that was going on. So
awesome.
we were telling them some stories about the tunnel and everything else like that, and then they went off on their merry way.
So they're bait then, right?
It was just my friend, like my co-investigator that was talking the entire time. And it was so interesting. So basically, what happened was, I'm sorry, 1 second. I just have to.
That's okay.
Take care of something. So we left the recording thing in there. We went back and we came back to it later, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm listening to it, I hear the point of where we're getting to the point. I'm like, okay, yeah, I know. I'm like, I know this part, etc., etc. I'm like, all right, this is like, okay, yeah, blah blah blah. And I'm falling asleep.
Okay.
Getting to a point and falling asleep. I hear another woman's voice speak over top of my colleague, like crystal clear.
Yeah.
Crystal clear. And I'm like, hold on a second. The hell was that? I play it back and I play it for her to hear. And she's like, nobody said that at all. Because it sounds like this woman interrupts her, but but my colleague just kept speaking. What it was she, so as we were in there and she's talking and she's like, oh, you can see there's like markings on the wall. There's markings here. There's pentagrams on the wall.
Oh, that's lovely.
And you can hear somebody basically like right over top of the recorder, which was above us at the time. Right over top of the recorder, it's just like this really aloof female. She's just like, I know that. Who are you? And then
that's fucking creepy, to put things politely.
Yeah. And so we're just like continuing on like nothing's happening because we didn't hear anything. So listening to that afterwards, I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, that was crazy. So that was like, and again, these are just the beginning. It was very spooky, Nearnath. Absolutely spooky. So I'm gonna get back to the story in just a moment. I'm gonna get to Naughty's before we get too far into here.
Okay.
So Naughty One has a paranormal story. Here's a very interesting paranormal story. My mom had a friend who came over while I was really ill, and she was a little surprised when she saw an Indian man and a woman standing over me. She said they were keeping a presence in the house from coming near me. She said she had seen them before when she had met me, but they were always distant. And I asked my mom who had Indian heritage. And we learned about 10 years later that my great-grandma was adopted off an orphan train and had been taken from the Blackfeet tribe. So I do believe that spirits stick around. That is very, very cool.
That is.
Yeah. And so Dead Punk Gage is saying, so along the same lines, do you believe the story about the Amityville horror, or was it all just something that we as a society collectively want to be real?
Oh, Amityville horror. That's...
Yeah, I think that stuff is partially a collective thing. Like, I mean, it's so strange. It's so strange. It's hard to say. I mean, there's records of it happening.
Yeah.
But it's based on a true story, which means it just has to have a little bit, your phone's ringing.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, just give me a quick second. I will take care of this. I'll be right back.
No problem. So getting back to the other part of the story here. So this is not where it ended. The one girl that we brought in there. So she was scared shitless of this tunnel. Like, really, really terrified. We pressed on. She said that she felt like something was pulling her to the back of the tunnel. Now, to give you an idea, this tunnel is probably about 80 feet long, and the last 20 feet of the tunnel is submerged in water. We tried to see how deep it went or where it went. It was just nothing but like complete muck. You couldn't walk in it. It was basically like full of mud and silt. It was not solid. You couldn't go through it. So she said she was being beckoned or pulled to the back of that, and she did not want to be there. to the point where it got so bad, we had to like physically, like 3 of us had to physically pick her up and drag her out of the tunnel. We left all the equipment in the tunnel. We had to physically pick her up and drag her out because she did not, like, she wanted to get out, but she couldn't leave. And she kept trying to break free from us to go to the end of the tunnel. So we determined at that point, we're like, all right, we're going to pack things up. We're going to go. So after about 20 minutes of like calming her down, went back in the tunnel, grabbed all the equipment, and left, packed up for the day, and went home. So as I'm listening to this stuff on playback, I hear the point where it's all the commotion and getting her out of the tunnel, et cetera, et cetera. Super quiet. No one's in the tunnel at this point, and you can't get into it. You can only get into it from the area that we were at. So we know that no one was in the tunnel, and no one could get into the tunnel because you can't get into it from the other side. I heard something, what sounded like something jumping down from a higher area. It was not a very tall place. I mean, the entire top to bottom of the tunnel was probably about 10 feet. So it was not very big. Like, you couldn't stand on somebody's shoulders. So it sounded like someone had jumped down and like landed with 2 feet right below the microphone. And then you hear heavy footsteps pacing back and forth underneath the microphone. And then you hear this like really creepy laugh. I'll try to like represent it here. I'm really bad with this, but it was just kind of like your stereotypical like psychotic person laugh. It was just a you hear that. And a couple minutes later, like after some more boot steps, you hear this voice. And this is what I was talking about, like the really deep gruff, like the really dark sounding man's voice. Just go like in the distance, not necessarily near the microphone. All you hear is, "You took her." And I took my headphones off. I put my headphones down, and I called my other investigators. I'm like, "You guys need to listen to this." So I sent the time code, and they nearly shat their pants too. The voice literally said, "You took her." And and from that point, we never brought her back to that area, obviously. But from that point on, we were trying to talk to that particular personality. Welcome back, Mr. Hop.
Thank you. Mr. Hop Sr. says hello to everybody.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So we tried to talk with that particular personality. It did not like us very much.
Ooh.
Because we took his favorite toy away. But that particular one remembered our names, and it also had like a really nasty opinion of women. Like it would call any female investigator in there, it would call them all sorts of colorful names.
That's rude.
Yeah. So it was very interesting, to say the least. So that's the story behind the Blue Ghost Tunnel and why and just giving you a little idea about what tulpas are and how they exist. And so that's why it's important to not use Ouija boards as well. Now,
yeah, we're gonna get into that. Yeah,
we're gonna get into that as well. Now, I'm not saying that this I could very well have been something, because I'm sure that people have used Ouija boards there in the past, but I'm not saying that particular thing was brought there by a Ouija board. But the reason why you do not use a Ouija board unless you understand how to use it is because that is a very crude type of mediumship. And when we're talking, and this goes back to what I was talking about before, in terms of different types of psychics and mediums are two different things. I mean, they're in the same group, but they're two different things. So psychics can see things, hear things, smell things, taste things, blah, 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 feel things, know things, what have you. Mediums, however, invite things to come into them to deliver messages. And so when you are using a Ouija board, for example, you are actively inviting things to come into you to deliver a message. That's why it's this big meme that, oh, you just moved the little thing. Well, yes, that's the point though. The point is that you are inviting things into you, like whoever is using the Ouija board, you're all opening yourselves up to being influenced by something. And by moving the little tablet thing, you're delivering that message. But when people get freaked out and they're saying, I'm not moving it, yes, you are, but it's because you're being influenced by an outside source. The reason that's dangerous is because if you do not know how to push that thing out, it can stick with you. And it can do a lot of different things, which is not very good. Nearness is saying, a friend of mine lived in a house with the sound of running feet and scratching noises upstairs. No one was there. They were superstitious, lived there for years, wrote it off as mice. Came to find out the former owner had killed his wife in a fit of rage 7 years earlier. Holy cow.
Damn. Fuck, I know I'm sensitive to hear stuff like that, but
that is wild.
Goodness.
Well, it was interesting because we actually, I can actually talk about this now because the NDA ran out a few years ago. But okay. we actually had a sanctioned investigation of the Preston Springs Hotel in Cambridge. Okay. For those who are not local to the area, there is a giant hotel.
Yeah,
that looks like something out of a movie.
It's in a really weird location too. Like this is not one of these happy hotels on top of a hill. It's like it's almost like in front of the large hill type of thing, which is weird. It's
like built into the hill. It's weird.
Yeah.
And it has a hot spring in the basement. It has a sulfur hot spring. So we got the unique permission to go in there from the ownership. But it changed hands a million times, but we got the unique permission to go in there and investigate paranormal stuff that was happening, because they've been trying to rebuild this hotel for I think 50 years.
Yeah,
and they cannot get a construction company to stay on site for more than 6 months. The reason being is because weird shit happens at this place constantly. I was talking to the groundskeeper of the place, and he was saying and this is back 10 some odd years ago. He was saying the last time that they had a construction company in there to try and because half of the building is being restored. Most of the building has intact floors, intact this and that, whatever else. But half of the building, or I'd say like more close to a quarter of the building, does not have flooring. It just has like sheet metal that's waiting to be filled and waiting to be covered. Mm-hmm. So they have their cement mixer on the second floor, and they're going to be pouring the concrete steps so they could get to the basement and to the top. There's about 4 or 5 floors, I think. So they have their cement mixer going on the second floor, and they're like, well, it's going to take a minute. Let's go grab a bite to eat. So they went and had lunch, and when they went back to the area that they were going to pour cement mixer was gone. The mixer, the cement, everything gone.
Wow.
They're like, what the fuck? Like, where the fuck did it go?
Homeless people.
Like, it's this massive, huge machine that you literally can't just pick up. Like, it's a big machine. You need like a bunch of people to move it.
And it built out of steel and iron and
so they went looking
down.
So they went looking for it all over the place, and they found it on the top floor, on the 5th floor in the attic.
Wow.
And they're like, you know what? Fuck this. We're out. We're done.
Poltergeists moving stuff around without permission.
Yeah. So there's like, no, that was it. And they packed
waste
up
of energy.
And they left. They packed up their shit and they left. And they're like, well, they're like, nope, we're done.
Nope. See ya.
Because they had shit go missing all the time. They had like shovels go missing. They had ladders go missing. All this sort of stuff. This was the last straw for them.
Yeah.
So when we were in there, we actually had some really interesting photos. I'll have to find if I can dig them up. But like we have photos of what seems to be a wartime nurse that was in like the kitchen area. What's now the kitchen area, and the ballroom area. But we have photos of her it looks like a woman, and she's wearing what looked like wartime nurse uniform. And we didn't know at the time, but apparently we found out later, because the groundskeeper just kind of chuckled. He's like, when I don't remember which war it was. One of the wars, this particular hotel was converted into a kind of like a rest home / like hospital sort of thing, like not like an urgent care hospital, but it was basically for troops when they came back to Canada. They would house them there and they would recuperate.
Okay.
Like it would be for like
a halfway house.
Injuries, right?
Injuries. Okay.
So people that like lost a limb or whatever else, they'd get shipped back and they would get patched up, and they would I don't think anybody died there. It was just more or less they would go there and they would get taken care of until they got better to go home.
It's not a sanitarium.
So it wasn't a sanitarium. No, it was just like, no.
Yeah.
So, cause they had the hot springs there.
Yeah.
And everything else. So
that's weird, because there isn't really a lot of hot springs in the region. So having one there on top of the hotel, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. It's so strange. I guess it was like a big drawback thing. It was a hotel in Hot Spring.
Yeah,
so, there you go.
Nice.
But so basically, that there was that, which was interesting. We had some very interesting happenings throughout the night as well. But one part that kind of spooked the team was that there was a group of people that went up to the 4th floor, because apparently the 4th floor was like one of the haunted areas, because the 4th floor used to be the place, because it used to be an old folks home.
Yep.
At one point. As well in its history.
Yep.
So the 4th floor is where they put their mentally unstable people. And the 4th floor is apparently one of the most haunted areas of that location. So they were upstairs and they were going through a bunch of the different rooms. They were sitting down and they got freaked out because they heard plastic rustling in one of the rooms next to them, or one of the rooms across from them, and they thought it was a raccoon. Okay. So they kind of got freaked out and ran downstairs. And so they told us, like, oh, it's in this room, blah, blah, blah. We went upstairs, didn't really find anything. Like, there was no plastic, there was no nothing. We're like, okay, well, it was probably just an animal.
So that raccoon takes it and hides it.
So as we're talking to the groundskeeper the next day, we're telling him about all the stuff that was going on, and he just kind of like shook his head and smiled, and we're like, oh, what's going on? He's like, oh, it didn't happen to take place in this room, did it? And he named off like some room, and they're like, yeah, that was the exact room. Why? And he's like, oh, well, rumor had it that years ago, when this place used to be like an old folks home, blah blah blah. This floor and whatever else used to house all the mentally unstable patients. Oh. And that particular room, I can't find any record of this. Yeah. He's like, rumor had it that particular room had like the old woman that was staying in there suffocated herself with a plastic bag.
Oh, lovely.
So,
goodness gracious.
That was an interesting thing. That was a very, very interesting thing. So, yeah, lots of really intriguing stuff that goes on with that. So,
most definitely. So, here's a question for you, getting back to Ouija board stuff here, just for a small second. Do you know the history of the Ouija board and how it became a child's play toy for Hasbro?
Well, I think it was just like, Ouija boards have been around before it was a toy, but
for sure.
But yeah, I think it was just kind of capitalizing on the whole like medium craze, stuff like that. Do you have an idea? Or?
I have absolutely no idea whatsoever. I was hoping you could answer that more than anything else, because I think the Ouija board really came in prominence. I think I want to say the 70s, because that was a funky time, but I almost want to go back to the 50s almost, because at that point in time the hula hoop was coming out. I know that sounds really weird to say, and other unknown things like that type of thing. And then
I think that there was a huge craze around like tarot and mediums.
Yeah, because I remember the late 70s, early 80s being a really funky time for like Bigfoot, UFOs, unexplained mysteries, stuff like that type of thing. That was the name of a show, but it was stuff like that coming up. And it's always weird how a toy manufacturer can actually purchase something like that and pump it out there. And plus on top of that, oh hell, let's make a movie on it, shall we?
Yeah. Well, the important thing to remember about Ouija boards, and this is something that like people really need to understand. And like I understand this is something that's more or less born of the want and the need for loved ones that have passed on to be close to us. Yeah, I mean, to a point, yeah, they stay with you. If they stay with you in your thoughts and your memories of them and your heart and all that stuff, but the spirit, the whole that is them, passes on. So when you're talking to someone, quote unquote someone, through a Ouija board, you're not actually talking to that person, or you may not be talking to the person you think you are, because when you're talking to these particular things, if you're inviting these entities or these spirits in, they're not necessarily, and they have not necessarily ever been part of the human plane or part of human existence. They could just be raw emotional energy. They could just be entities that exist differently, right?
Yeah.
So like spirits and things like that have never actually been human before. But a lot of times they will likely be screwing with you, or they will say something to get you to feel a certain way because they'll feed off that emotion, etc., etc.
Spirits can be jerks sometimes. Goodness.
See here. Yeah, same time the seance became popular.
Yeah.
The seances were huge.
Yeah.
That was a big party thing too.
Again, that goes back to the 70s and 80s type of thing, if I'm not mistaken.
So what if ghost hunters worked for Hasbro and they bind random spirits to each individual board before shipping them out? That's no, that wouldn't necessarily work unless you're like.
Do you have any idea? Do you have any idea how funny that would be?
Well,
especially from a manufacturer's perspective.
The material just doesn't add up very well. It doesn't really work. I'm going to work down these comments here. Yeah. Recall the late 19th century, 20th century having a huge supernatural craze. Arthur Conan Doyle, Houdini, absolutely agree.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Jay Lydian, it's an echo. Absolutely agree. Very much. I like to consider them footprints, or just stuff like that. It's not the entire person. It's just what they leave behind. Yeah. And it's not to say. And a lot of people say like, "Oh, how dare you? My grandmother is at peace," and blah blah blah. It's like, yes, that's fine. It's just a remnant. It's just an echo, just a footprint. It's just an essence of who that person used to be that's left, or a lying demon. Yes, we're talking about Ouija boards. I don't think there's anything quote unquote demonic. I'll get to that in a second. Do not have to be truthful. Absolutely. Agreed. My manager at work is a demonic presence.
That's what happens when you take Ouija boards to work with you.
Have you ever had any experience with a demonic presence? I have had experiences with things that claim to be demons, but you have to understand when you're talking to. This is another term that's going to be thrown around a lot. That doesn't mean what people think it means. When you're talking to elementals, and you're talking to spirits or entities that have never been, quote unquote, on the mortal plane. So what I say by that is you're talking to something that has never actually been a human or been a person. You're talking to things that have just been either emotions or impressions or blah, blah, blah. This dates back to like even early Germanic and things like that. When you talk about gravekeepers, for example, gravekeepers weren't actually people. I don't know if you know about this, Mr. Hawk.
No, I do not.
So the tradition of a quote unquote gravekeeper was not the stereotypical person that would be staying around the graves at like midnight, walking around with the lantern and the shovel and groundskeeper and whatever else. Not necessarily, it wasn't those people. Gravekeepers used to be spirits that early settlers would make offerings to and ask them to watch over their ancestors' graves and keep them safe. So the more traditional name for them were whites.
Whites.
They would call them land whites. And so you would offer them traditional things like tobacco, honey, sometimes like
Fruit.
liquor, like whiskey, things like that. You would offer them those things. You would give a gesture, and then you would encase the area in iron, because they believed that would keep.
Explains the iron gates around most cemeteries, doesn't it?
Exactly, because they would keep they would think that the iron keeps in the spirit, keeps in the gravekeeper, and binds them to the ground, and gives them an area to patrol.
Yeah.
So that's why the iron bars, iron gates, iron chains have been a traditional thing since early Germanic culture.
All right.
As far as I'm aware. So the very interesting part about that is when you're dealing with an elemental or you're dealing with a white, especially one that's been tasked to be a gravekeeper, there's actually an old Germanic graveyard in town, which you can experience this. I wouldn't say go and do it just to piss it off, but you can take my word for it. It will not necessarily do things outright.
Yep.
That will, like, it won't pick you up and throw you out.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So it will not grab you by the scruff of the neck and throw you out of the graveyard, but it will do stuff to fuck with you and make you want to leave. So this is why it's closer to calling them elementals, because these things don't operate like humans do emotionally, because they are just raw emotion, or they're tasked for specific things, or they don't like for example, this is where the whole idea for fairies and fae come from, right?
Okay.
Whereas like you never thank a fae, or you never apologize or everything else like that, because like to show your gratitude to a fae or an elemental, you make an offering. Because if you just speak that you're sorry, or you speak that you apologize, that's empty. If there's no action behind it, then you're just lying to them. And often lying to a fae or lying to an elemental is far greater a problem for you than whatever thing you were doing to them. So that pisses them off a lot more. So when you're apologizing or you're thanking them, you just give them something. Because if you think that the tradition is, never thank a fae, because if you thank a fae, that means you owe them a favor.
Interesting. So, I've honestly never heard of that before.
Yeah. So that's in that culture, it's a sign of like, it's more a meritocracy, where it's like you show them or whatever else, you do things for them, you give them something, you show your gratitude, or you show your like you ask for forgiveness by making an offering to them, and they will either accept it or let you know that they did not accept it, and you'll find out. Okay. You'll find out very easily. So basically,
wait a second. How do you find out very easily?
it manifests in a very obvious way.
Oh, that's great!
Yeah,
wonderful.
Depending on the entity, it will manifest in a very obvious way.
Awesome. And what happens after this manifesting?
So generally, you kind of get the message. Either you stop doing the thing that pissed it off, or it amends. That's bottom line.
All right. Okay.
So basically, if you go into a graveyard that is under the care of a gravekeeper, for example, if you are there to visit or like mourn somebody, it will allow you your time to be there and mourn them. If you're there for nefarious reasons, it will do things to make you leave. or if it believes that you have overstayed your welcome because you're just there for several hours and you're not actually, doing anything, it will start to do things to make you leave, depending on the elemental. But this particular one in the cemetery locally, is we're kind of testing it out. When we're there doing our normal thing, we were there overstaying our welcome, obviously.
Okay.
We start to have animals showing up. We'll have rabbits and squirrels just start showing up and staring at us.
Awkward.
And they'll keep their distance from us, but we walk closer to them. They move away, and we walk away from them, and they follow us. But they always keep a distance.
Interesting.
Very
much so.
Then you start hearing footsteps behind you when there's nobody there. Then you start seeing things on the corner of your eye. And then when we sat down, this is the funniest part.
Okay.
We sat down in the corner of the graveyard. We're like, you know what? We're not leaving.
Yep. Screw you guys.
We're not going to go.
Yeah.
And a skunk walked out, literally right beside us. The skunk walked out onto the tarp that we were sitting on. It looked at all of us. We looked at it. It turned around, started to walk away, stopped, looked back at us as if to say, "It's your last fucking warning," and then walked out. We're like, okay.
Whoa, fuck.
Message dessert. Like message got.
Message received. Gotcha.
Message received. We got it.
It's really time to go. You see the porcupine start rolling and saying, "Hey, I could do tricks too, yo."
So that was pretty funny. But yeah, it will do stuff to make you leave. It'll do stuff to make you uncomfortable. Basically, let you know that there's something there, etc., etc. But depending on the thing, it will react accordingly. There was one case that we got called into where this lady was dealing with what she claimed to be possessions.
Okay.
She's saying that she was having a demonic entity that was terrorizing her home and blah, 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 blah. So investigating it, we couldn't really find anything abnormal in terms of the house, in terms of the electrical, because as weird as it sounds, EMF, so electromagnetic frequency, will actually mess with your mind. So if you are in an area, and for myself, for example, I'm very sensitive to EMF. So if I'm in an area or a room that has a really, really intense electromagnetic field, I'll start to get headaches. My vision starts to go blurry. Oh. I start to like get really anxious and sick to my stomach, etc., etc. So it affects people differently. But this particular woman had no issues in her house. Everything was perfectly shielded. Everything else like that. I mean, some houses we've gone to, we found because some people are like, "Oh, I'm having terrible nightmares. I just can't stop. Like, I'm having night terrors." Stuff. I see stuff around my house all the time. We check their bed, and yeah, sure enough, there's an there's not a grounded junction box near their or an unshielded junction box near their bed, gotcha, which is throwing off this massive EMF field, which just happens to cover the head of their bed where they're sleeping. And it's just like, just flip your bed around, you should be fine. And they flip their bed around, and they're like, that's the best night's sleep I've ever had.
That's awesome. How much was the bill?
No, we don't charge for that stuff.
It's kind of funny.
But basically, this woman lady, no issues in her house whatsoever. Everything was perfectly fine. I was like, okay, well, this is weird. Then she said everything happened when she brought this angel idol into her house. She's like, I moved in and everything was fine, blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, I'm I'm really superstitious. So I brought this angel statue that my friend gave me a long time ago, blah, blah, blah. I brought it into my house and I made a blessing I made a prayer to God to keep watch over me and blah, 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 blah. And she's like, ever since I brought that statue in, she's like, I've been having like the worst reactions, stuff's happening around my house. I feel like things are attacking me and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, well, that's really, really weird. So I'm like, okay, well, can you do me a favor? Because like I walked over to the statue and I touched the statue.
Okay.
And like full disclosure, everybody out there, if you don't already know, I've already been told, and I've known this about myself, that I have some pretty potent like psychic abilities, like mediumship abilities, I should say. So, I don't know how to explain it. You'll have to see me in person, and I can explain it better for you. But I touch the statue, and I close my eyes, and I concentrate on the statue. And the image in my mind I have is this big hulking fucking mass. Like, it's a creature of some sort. I can't really describe it. It was huge. It
Awesome.
was huge. Like, all I can say was it was fucking very, very, very big. And I'm like, wow, that's weird. I'm like, I've never seen this before. I don't know what it is. It was just this big, massive creature. I'm like, all right then. Okay. So I'm like, can you do me a favor? Can you touch the statue? I asked the lady to, and she's like, oh, okay, why? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just like, I don't know why. It's just a feeling. Can you just please touch the statue? She's like, okay. So she puts her hand on the statue, and then she literally, like within seconds, falls to the floor in a seizure.
Ooh.
And she's having like convulsions on the floor. And so we had a person on the team that was a paramedic, and so they were able to assist her and make sure she didn't
That's cool.
do anything terrible. But when she was doing that, I had another thought in my mind that it was basically like showed the area, and and it was like the giant creature, and it was like this area. I'm like, okay, I think I get this now. So I'm like, let me try something. I don't know why this is going to work, but I think it's going to work. I'm like, do you smoke? Once she came to, obviously, she was having like a panic attack.
Yeah.
Once we got her calmed down, once she came to, I'm like, do you smoke? She's like, yeah. Well, I'll go outside and have a smoke. So we're outside, and she's like shaking and she's kind of panicking. I'm like, look, I think this is what's happened. I'm like, I think you have, I think that you have accidentally pissed something off.
That happens more often than not, doesn't it?
Yeah. It was. I'm like, I think you've accidentally pissed something off. I think by coming in here and basically consecrating your grounds without asking permission. Yeah, I'm a sensitive. Exactly, Randy. I'm like, by consecrating the grounds, bringing in your little angel statue, and asking for your God to bless it, and blah 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 blah. I think you've accidentally pissed something off because you didn't ask permission of whatever was living here before. And it's basically equivalent of walking into somebody's house, kicking over their coffee table, and saying, "This is mine now."
Sorry. This is my house.
It's my house.
Fuck yourself to the coffee. Go on the coffee table.
And then it's basically it's like this entity's like, fuck me? No, fuck you. Exactly. So I'm like, what you need to do, I might just call me crazy. I'm like, I think what you need to do here is you can make an offering to it. You can say that you apologize, you didn't realize that it was there, blah, blah, blah. Ask its permission to stay on the land. Say that, you're going to do X, Y, or Z.
That's tough. Ask permission to stay on the land. We just bought the house.
Yeah. But this is show the intent. Show the intent that you're not there to be an intruder, that you're there to, and show that you have honest intentions. And she's like, well, how do I do that? I'm like, well, break one of your cigarettes, take the tobacco, sprinkle it, and as you're doing it, emphasize that in thought or speak it or something. And I'm like, you have to do it over on this corner of your lawn. I'm like, don't ask me why. That's what it is. Because I had this clear vision in my mind of what she needed to do, and I'm like, I can't explain it. I'm like, I just have to. This is what you need.
Yeah.
So she's like, okay, I guess. And so she took one of her cigarettes, walked to the area that I told her to, broke the cigarette open. She started sprinkling it around on the ground. And no word of a lie, as soon as she started doing that, it started to rain.
That's That's fucking creepy. Sorry, there's no other words I could use. That's like
it was super creepy.
Lightning bolt.
There's no
whoa.
It was just a really nice, peaceful little shower.
Yeah,
it was a nice little it was a nice little night shower. No
that.
thunder, no lightning, no nothing. And I let her do that, and then I asked her how she felt afterwards. She's like, I feel completely calm. I'm like, well, I guess you got your permission then. And from that point forward, she never had a problem in her house again.
Wow.
So again, like this is the stuff we talk about when we're talking about paranormal. It's stuff that you cannot explain and you don't understand it, but it just happens. And like I would be what would be considered clairsentient. Like I get stuff beamed into my head, and I'm not saying aliens. It's just like it's just like
tinfoil downstairs.
Yeah, it's not aliens. It's not anything like that. It's just like
awesome.
I just like have thoughts in my head. I'm just like, I didn't really think of that, but okay, I guess that's what that is then. But it was that situation. It was like I got this clear image of this creature thing, which I would later find out would be technically a quote unquote elemental. This massive thing. Yeah, it's a fleeting image or thought that you have to process. Is exactly it. Jay Lydian nailed it. But basically, it was like this really ancient thing that was there before we were, etc., etc. Yes, no, 100%. She actually did try and call a priest, and it made it worse. And so she called us. She tried calling a priest. She tried having them come in there and do an exorcism, and it made things worse.
That's great.
Yeah. So that was very, very interesting. But wondering what would be the difference? Well, basically, the difference between that was that she was staking a claim to land that she didn't have permission to own, which is the best thing that I can describe. So when you're talking about it, like this particular elemental apparently had a claim on a ley line, which we found out later.
I don't even know what a ley line is.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
we found out much later, I think a couple of years later, that house actually was on an intersection of ley lines.
Oh, an intersection, you say?
Yeah. So
wow.
Just by chance, it was weird. But the area, this is the strange part. The area that I told her to go break the cigarette over and make the offering to was where the ley lines intersected.
Did you know that ahead of time?
I did not know that ahead of time.
Goodness.
I know. It was, again, this entire thing was very, very strange. So basically, she walked into this area, which had already been, quote unquote, claimed by this elemental. Not like she would have known this, but she was inviting her energy and her spirits and her entities into that space. And that seemed to piss off the elemental. It's like, hey,
listen, bitch, how are we going to put this politely here? Okay.
It's like, yeah, this is my fucking house. Why are you inviting all these people in here?
And what the fuck is that thing?
Yeah. Like, get the fuck out of here. And then so she had the priest over and then made that a lot fucking worse, like obviously. So basically when she made the offering to it and said, this is my intention, I did not mean to intrude, blah, blah, blah. Can I have your permission to have this tiny space? I'll respect you, blah, blah, blah. And it seemed to accept that. It was like, all right, you understand now. Stop inviting people over at 3:00 in the morning.
Especially those priests. Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're talking about that, it's like from a metaphysical level, it's like you can live in a building, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't recognize or you don't imprint energy on that building, from the metaphysical level, that building doesn't technically exist. However, if you imprint psychic energy or your mental energy onto those walls, even if you destroy the physical building, the psychic energy, the mental energy stays there, and it still represents that building. So it's more or less like if you were to go on somebody's plot of land and start building a house, they probably wouldn't like that very much.
Especially if you don't ask permission.
If you don't ask permission. and then you call the police in to get them to evicted. Yeah, they're probably not going to like that a whole lot.
There'll probably some interesting conversations going back and forth with that.
Yeah, so it's very, very, very interesting stuff. So that's basically that story there, and that was one of the most prolific things that I've ever experienced.
Whew.
Yeah, no, the whole like it raining, it's starting to fucking rain as soon as
What, like the chances of all that happening, that's really astronomical.
It was astronomical.
I don't use that word too often, but holy crapolas! Like rains, it's an intersection lane line. It's like a spirit that's been there since time immemorial and everything else like that. And here you are bouncing, going, "Hey, I just got this feeling."
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just cleaning my glasses right now.
Yeah.
I just got this feeling
deep inside of me.
Exactly. That sounds like a supernatural squatter dispute. It's exactly what it was. 100%. That's what it turned out to be. Because to this day, she's never had an issue. Everything went perfectly fine again.
You know, what'd be interesting. Oh, wait a minute. What was this?
Have you ever investigated an area where traumatic or horrible things occurred? Yes.
Ooh, that's heavy.
Yes, I have. I investigated Waverly Hills Sanitarium, where that particular location, they actually did practice electroshock therapy on their patients, and that was very, very interesting. That was one that I actually freaked out the tour guide during that one.
What did you do?
Waverly Hills Sanitarium, for people that don't know, I mean, it's a very famous place in Kentucky.
Okay.
It's notoriously haunted. Bunch of ghost hunter shows have gone there before. If chances are, if you've watched any of the ghost hunting shows that have been at Waverly Hills Sanatorium, you would have seen the guide that we got, because he was the guide that's been there for a very, very long time.
Mm-hmm.
So when we went there, we had him, and he's been there for like 25 years plus. So he's seen everything. He's heard everything.
Of course.
So we sat down with him, and we had I can't remember what the hell this was. Machine. I think it's fuck. What the hell is it called? I think it's like a MEL meter, MEL meter.
Okay.
It's this weird machine that I have, which measures a bunch of different things. It measures like temperature differences. It measures proximity. It measures EMF. It measures a whole bunch of shit.
Okay.
So I had a MEL meter set up at the end of a hallway, and we're all sitting down and we're asking questions, and complete nothing at all. No reaction for about 10-15 minutes. And so he's apologizing to us. He's like, he's like, sometimes just stuff just doesn't happen. He's like, I'm sorry, blah, 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 blah. He's like, I guess we should pack it up. And as soon as he's saying we should pack it up, I get this name in my head. I'm like, hold on a second. And he's like, what? I'm like, just hold on a second. I need to try something. He's like, okay, yeah, no problem. Go ahead. And so I'm like concentrating, because I'm like trying to figure it out. I'm like, how the fuck do I ask this without sounding like a complete fucking lunatic? And so I'm like, all right, does your name start with a G? And the fucking machine lit up like Christmas. Like lights, sound, everything. Like the lights were EMF. The sound means that something was close to it. So like lights, sound, everything was going off like it was Christmas. The fucking guy turns to me. He's like, how the fuck did you know that? No idea. I have no idea. So that was a funny story behind that one. But like lots of weird stuff, because that was Waverly Hills was used as a sanatorium for tuberculosis patients, and they tried all sorts of stuff to cure tuberculosis, including electroshock therapy and electroshock baths.
Jeez.
So yeah, that was a very, very interesting place. Really, really loved that place. I wish that because I lost a lot of the archive stuff, because we had a team dispute. Unfortunately, didn't get all of the archive stuff. Our tech guy took all of it and didn't take half of it. Didn't give his half of it. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of that stuff to go from. But still have the experience. But Naughty One says, I've been near the Annie Cook's property. Was it? And it gave me the heebie-jeebies. It's gonna be interesting to get to hear of an authentic investigation. Yeah, I'd love to get back to investigating. It's just time, money, and having a group of people to do it. Basically,
Yeah.
it's the only issue.
Gotcha. As I was going to say before, remember the hotel that's in Cambridge with the hot springs?
Yeah,
Preston. Yeah, just imagine if that was some sort of landline type of thing.
I'm sure it is. It is.
That'd be interesting. Again, been around the block once or twice, seen lots of architecture, really like architecture structure. I've never seen a hotel or a structure such as that. It's really unique type of thing.
Well, we actually had a photo, and I don't know if I still have this one. I'm pretty sure I have it buried somewhere. But we actually have a photo of the front of that fucking place.
Oh, yeah.
We took a break. We took like a smoke break halfway through because we investigated it on Halloween. Of all time.
Oh, even better.
It was wonderful. But we took a smoke break, and someone took a photo. They walked down to the intersection, and they took a photo of the front of the building at like 3 or 4 a.m. I don't remember.
That's awesome.
But we looked at it later, and everybody was outside. There was nobody in the building. And I shit you not, in one of the fourth floor windows, there's a fucking outline of a person. There's a silhouette of a person in one of the windows.
Great.
Yeah. Very, very interesting.
Was it interesting question for that? Was that caught on digital?
Yeah.
Or one of the older cameras?
It was caught on digital.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I do know is that there used to be mirrors and cameras and stuff like that, and sometimes with the mirrors it's a little bit of silver, and sometimes you could capture certain supernatural activities going on and stuff like that. The new digital stuff doesn't have that same.
Well, the funny part is, right, so when we're talking, because I like to talk about electronic voice phenomena, because that's one thing that has been like throughout history. It's always been captured. Yeah. And this will probably be like the last topic that I do before we wrap things up here.
Yeah.
But that's something that's always been since the start of recordings. We've always caught electronic voice phenomena. And what that means is like, so it's audible on playback, but you didn't hear it at the time. So, or you didn't notice it at the time. So for the longest time, the prevailing thought was, well, it was just playing at a frequency that our ears can't hear at the time, and it was recorded on that. And The problem with that is that if it was recorded on a frequency that we can't hear, it will play back on a frequency that we can't hear. Makes sense. That's not what EVPs are, in my opinion. And this is something that I still want to find a way to test, and I don't know how to go about it. I have an idea. I have some tests that I want to do. I just haven't had the time, money, or equipment to do it.
Yeah.
But basically, one of the tests that I wanted to do involves the way that microphones record, right? So microphones from the old times to now, they all have the same little piece of metal inside the microphone. It's like a microfilament thing.
Yep.
That it vibrates when sound is made, right? So when you're talking, like I'm talking to a microphone right now, it's vibrating this piece of metal, and that piece of metal is sending the frequency of sound through the wire, and it's being interpreted, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And that translates into sound so that you guys can hear it. So my thought was, because this has been happening since microphones existed. What if, because here's a thought.
Yeah.
If it's not a sound wave that's making the metal piece vibrate, what's making it vibrate? The only thought is, the only thing that would make sense was if there was an electromagnetic frequency, or if there was an electric frequency, something that was conductive or that was able to interact with that metal piece. If there was a frequency that simulated sound wave, which EMF does, EMF is capable of mimicking sound wave in terms of like the wavelength. So if electromagnetic frequencies were to kind of like mimic a sound wave, we wouldn't hear it with our ears because it's not actually moving air, it's not moving sound, and our ears interpret by vibrating. and our eardrums are not conductive.
Yeah.
They're not conductive materials.
Yeah.
So they don't interpret sound that way. Microphones do. So, like, case in point, if you hold something up like electrical to a microphone, you're going to hear that buzzing noise, right?
Yeah.
The electrical buzzing noise. So if something that's like an EVP, if an EMF is close to a sound wave but not quite, gets picked up and recorded by a microphone, it's going to play back not quite perfect audio quality, right?
Yeah.
It's going to play back distorted. It's going to play back robotic. It's going to play back like sound. It sounds like something is off because it's not quite a sound wave. Piezoelectric element. I have to look into that. I think that's what it is. But it's going to play like that. The other thing is, which strengthens my thoughts on this, because maybe if things speak and hear in electromagnetic frequencies. So if an EMF was to vibrate at the exact same wavelength as a sound wave, would that record that sound, even though we can't hear it, and it would play back and it would play that sound? So the only thing that strengthens this in my thing, which is why I think I have meat on this bone, is that when you're talking about psychics and you're talking about psychic encounters or ghost encounters, when someone says that they felt like they felt something touch them or whatever else, so if they have scratches that show up on them, they always report that the scratches look very jumbled. Like if you were to take your fingernail and run it down your arm right now, it would be a straight line, right? It'd be a nice straight line. Yep. These paranormal scratches, they're very disjointed, they're very jagged, they're very janky.
Okay. Jank is a good word.
My thoughts are, because for something to quote unquote pierce the veil, it would take an immense amount of energy. And there's not anything at all that's going to burn like a universe's worth of energy to interact with you. You're just not that important. I'm sorry.
Oh, well.
The easiest thing to do, however, would be to interact with your brain directly, right? So if your brain 1000% believes that something scratched you, because this is stuff that's happened before, right? Because
there's many accounts of that throughout.
There's many accounts of like bruises showing up, or phantom
wounds,
or wounds, or different things like that just appearing because of the brain just got a signal and it's like, all right, guess that's time.
And how many times I come to you saying, do you see this bruise on my leg?
Well, that's a different story, but
yeah, that's true.
Basically, the way that pain works, the way that feeling works is when you touch something, or like when something touches you.
Yeah.
There's a signal that gets sent from the place it's being touched up to your brain. Your brain's like, oh, you're being touched. I guess I better let you know. And then your brain sends a signal down to that nerve where it's being touched, and it has a reaction on the nerve saying that is being touched. Either that's feeling, or that's pain, or whatever.
Yep.
Blah blah blah. So it happens almost instantaneously. So what happens if, instead of having something touching you directly, you have something sending a signal to your brain that's exactly the same as your brain being like, oh, you're being touched?
That's freaky. That's
Isn't it?
Really, really freaky too. Oh yeah.
Isn't it
Definitely.
though? So here's the thing. If something is quote unquote scratching you or damaging you, right? What if it's interacting with your brain and it's telling your brain, oh shit, you're being cut. You need to move away. And your brain sends the signal back down. But because you're not being directly cut, or you're not being directly scratched.
Yeah.
Right? But your brain's like, you're being cut this much. You need to get out of there right now. So it sends it back down, but it doesn't send it in a straight line because your brain's dumb. And it needs that immediate feedback to do it normally. But because it's it's electronic frequency, it comes up jumbled. And so you're going to have a broken, like, janky line of where you're being scratched. So it's one of those things that I need to figure out how to go about proving this. But that seems to be the most plausible explanation for paranormal scratches, for those types of interactions. And honestly, when you're talking about it, like Ouija board and stuff like that, it's all about influencing and inviting that stuff mentally and etc. So if something is interacting directly with your brain, making you see something, making you hear something, making you smell something, there's that whole experiment called the God helmet. I don't know if you're familiar about this one.
I've honestly heard about this. Yes.
So they put people in this. For those who haven't heard it, there's a sensory deprivation helmet. They do this test where they blast one side of the subject's brain with electromagnetic frequency, and for some people, when they're in their separate sensory deprivation helmet and they have one half of their brain exposed to high levels of EMF, some people report feeling like there's an all-knowing, all-loving sense. Like they feel like there's a God presence.
Okay.
They feel loved. They feel like they're warm. They feel like they're taken care of. And when it's blasted on the other side of their brain, they feel anxious. They feel nervous. They feel sick. They feel like it's the complete opposite.
Yuck.
So it's really, really interesting because it does seem that electronic frequencies do have interactions with us in our mental states on very, very different levels. And I'm not here going to say I'm going to stop short of saying that 5G is like causing X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. But there is stuff out there to point to evidence to say that yes, we are having some sort of influence on our brains from the electronic airwaves and stuff. So Niren is saying there's definitely something beyond the physical world that interacts with the quote unquote real world in weird, unknown ways. Due to the huge mismatch, it's going to be inconsistent and seeming random. Absolutely. I think as we go along, we're going to see this more and more. My voice is starting to get hoarse here, so I'm going to have to wrap up.
Yeah.
But we're going to see it more and more where we're going to have like weird happenings and unexplained things. And I think that's just a fact of possibly where we are and different things and where we are as a society, where things go from there. With sensory things, sometimes giving children shots, needles, they will pinch or cause some minor pain the child will be aware of but not scared of, and at the shot at the same time. Absolutely. That is true. That is very, very true. So, yeah, very interesting stuff. Like, if you guys want to look at anything that we've talked about here, definitely do some research into it. I personally love the topic because it's fascinating to me. I find it really, really interesting. Don't believe me or believe me. Like, honestly, guys, go out there and experience it yourself because that's the best way. But I'm 100% telling you my experiences as they were, not making anything up on the fly here. So that I'm gonna have to take a look and see if I can find those.
That'd be cool. Maybe we'll save it all for the Halloween episode, perhaps. Yeah.
So I don't know. Did you have any closing thoughts here, Mr. Hop?
This has been a very riveting broadcast. I'm very happy we did this. A lot of spooky stuff, a lot of fun stuff, and we covered the whole spectrum from student debt to video games and how they're being treated to our most recent topic. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, no, I could honestly talk about this for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, but it's fascinating stuff. I've had so many experiences, so much to talk about. But yeah, I guess go out there and do the research, take a look and experience it yourself, because there's a lot to this world that we don't understand. I heard 5G can give you headaches. It's possible. I mean, it's probably more EMF related than anything else, I would say, if people are having headaches. But radio frequency is very much a thing.
Yeah. 5G, you can do your phone calling or cook a hot dog at the same time. Why not?
True. Well, as we start filling up the airwaves and as we start dipping into more and more radio frequencies, because I mean we've had radio frequencies for television and radio for the longest time, But now, as we start using them and we start adopting them, as we start changing frequencies on these devices to get better reception for X, Y, and Z, we're going to see a lot more of this stuff creeping up, because there's a lot of, I personally believe that there are a lot more things to do with this, with the human mind, that we care to believe, and that we've actually studied. And so I think that people should really get in there and study these effects of things, because we're going to start seeing more mental health issues. We're going to start seeing more of these things creeping up, not because people are deranged or because, they're putting chemicals in the water, but because we're having interference with our brain waves, and we have to find out a way to filter that out.
Yeah.
Or else we're just basically going to be cooking our brains.
Oh.
And filling it up. Like, imagine trying to think, because like this is the hardest part, right? When you're talking about mental illness, when you're talking about schizophrenics, and we're talking about other people, that just imagine what it's like to never have a moment's peace.
Yeah.
Imagine how it is to constantly have something in your head, either like another voice, or like, just say you had a radio program that just constantly played in the back of your mind.
Yeah, that'd be goodness.
Like, there's not a moment's peace that you have.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, you don't get any peace at all. It's constantly there. Just
yeah. Do you know much about scalar waves? I do not know. I might, but it'd be a topic I'd have to research. It sounds familiar. I can't place it right now. I used to be able to know when my phone would get a message or call because of the delay in frequency and the ringtone. Here's a strange thing. Okay.
And
I'm sure tons and tons of people understand that, like, have had this as experience as well. I don't know how many people out there have their phones as their alarm clock, or even alarm clocks in general.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot tell you how many times this has happened to me. Does not matter what time of day it is. Does not matter what time I set if it's my phone, if it's an alarm clock, if it's anything. I will always wake up 1 minute before my alarm goes off.
That's awesome. That happens to me sometimes too. Not quite 1 minute, but wake up before the alarm hits off.
Like, I will always, without fail, wake up exactly 1 minute before my alarm goes off, no matter what time it is.
That is cool and weird all at the same time.
Yeah, it's super duper weird.
Yeah, that's one hell of a internal clock you got there, Crumb. Goodness.
No, I don't think I have anything to do with it. But it's very, very, it's very strange, and I know tons of people have the same sort of thing happen too. So yeah. What about shortwaves? I don't know much about shortwaves. I don't know.
No.
This is all.
What is a shortwave? I've never heard of that before.
Like radio waves.
Okay. All right. Okay.
But yeah, basically, so just long story short about this, one last thing before we head out.
Yeah.
So my idea of an experiment, I want to be able to create a machine to figure out what frequency of magnetic field or EMF. I want to figure out what frequency of EMF is able to be recorded by microphone. And because this is a very important thing. If I can find out what frequencies are able to be recorded and picked up on microphone and play sound through, then I want to be able to create a machine that specifically records those frequencies, or specifically looks out for those frequencies, and then try to see if there's any correlation between those frequencies and people with psychic abilities.
Interesting.
So say I will be able to play, I'll be able to play like a short way, like a Moonlight Sonata, for example, like a short clip of the Moonlight Sonata, and I'll play that, and it will be silent. But say there's a psychic across from me that doesn't know what song I'm playing, or they have spirit guides, or they're a medium or something like that. I want to see if they're able to tell me by playing through these frequencies what that song is.
Yeah.
Because then we could start figuring out, okay, if they do get that song correct, was there any communication in that wave? Was there any fluctuations in that field? And we could record all of that.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very interested. I don't even know the first way of doing it. Basically,
yeah,
I have to do some research on it to figure out how to do it. But got some messages here.
Okay,
short waves are a long type of radio wave.
Okay.
Yeah. Shortwave band of EM used for long-range communications bounces off the ionosphere, allowing it to bounce around the world. Used to pick up transmissions from exactly, shortwave radios.
Yeah, that's why.
And, definitely research scalar waves. Love to hear my take on it, as well as what the waves had been and could be used for. That sounds very interesting. My interest is piqued now. And from Tubster, from the UK, and my primary school was a very old building. I remember that we would hear footsteps behind us when we were alone, walking to the toilet during class. That
creepy.
Was very, very common and very, very interesting. Like, I find this stuff so interesting because there's literally so much of the human potential that has yet to be tapped into. We're very like low, like not, I don't even like shallow, I guess the right word.
All right.
We're very shallow into the potential of what the human mind can get to, and it's all this sort of stuff that we're just so afraid to talk about and so afraid to look into.
Well, there's never no harm talking about it.
Well, it's one of these things. Like I always tell people, because people who are religious generally tend to steer away from this stuff. But I tell people, it's like, look, if I'm able to measure paranormal activity, if I'm able to measure these types of things, if I'm able to measure the frequencies that these exist on, I'm like, theoretically, you could eventually find a way to measure the God presence through the very same methods.
That's interesting.
So I mean, if people out there really want, I know for some people they don't want proof of there being a higher being, but that could lead somewhere. And Phoenix Orum's asking what our opinions are of EVPs. We actually just discussed that. So if you wanted to roll back, wanted to watch the end of the episode here, we did discuss that. So.
Roll back the videotape.
Play back the video. So I think that's all I have for today. Did you have anything else, Mr.?
Oh no, this has been another great broadcast. I really appreciate us tackling the subject. I think it's absolutely fantastic, especially for our 13th. But however, one of the few things that does scare me is that someone want one of these t-shirts. How did they get one?
That's very true. Let's see here. I'm going to pull that up real quick. Official stream business. We have Canuckleheads t-shirts.
Ta-da! T-shirts.
You get all kinds of these wonderful. You get the different collars.
Yep.
Get all these wonderful things.
Look at that. Different colors. Another collar. You get a black one, a red one, a green one.
Yep.
Maybe a black one.
Teespring. The link is going to be in the description below after the show. So be sure to check it out. But yeah, you get one of these lovely t-shirts.
Awesome.
Grab them while they're here. So
yeah, that's always groovy.
But that will be doing it for us today.
Yep. And also one of the few things as well, if people enjoy what they're seeing, should they hit that like button or what?
Yeah, hit the like, subscribe, whatever is out there, and to be sure to join the Patreon if you want to support us. $3 a month helps out a lot.
It does.
It's
cheaper than a cup of coffee at Starbucks.
$5 gets us $5 gets you into the Discord. $5 and up. So go from that if you want to join the discussion and have a say on what the shows are about. But before we go, next week we have Drexel joining us for a blackout stream. That's going to be fun. We have a whole bunch of topics. I've been holding off a bunch of topics to talk about because I want to get his take on them. Mostly about the fighting game community stuff and the Me Too stuff going on. So
the fighting game community, that should be interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so let's wrap this son of a bitch off, and hopefully people will tune on in next week.
Exactly. Thank you guys so much for joining us. This has been another Canuckleheads. As always, keep your stick on the ice.
And support each other.
Bye-bye.
See ya.